Good morning guys, it's Kira and welcome to Vlogmas episode 3. This morning is Sunday and because we got the tree yesterday, it was the first morning that I got to come downstairs and like turn the tree on, and I honestly feel like that is probably my favourite thing about December, is that each morning you get to come downstairs, it's all dark and cold in the living room, and then you just get to switch on the lights and suddenly the day just feels a million times more festive. So enjoyed doing that for the first time this year today. Are you being so naughty? Oh my goodness. If you watched yesterday's vlog, you will know that I was slightly concerned that Oscar wasn't going to want to come downstairs throughout December, because as soon as we put the tree up yesterday, he ran upstairs and he looked so scared when I turned the lights on. But last night he managed to find his inner cat and start playing with the tree. He hasn't done anything too dramatic just yet, but I just keep hearing this jingling sound in the background and he's just sat there like pawing at some of the decorations on the lower branches, and then he gets caught out, runs away, and then comes back and starts doing it again 5 minutes later. But that means that the tree is bringing joy to the entire family, so I would say that is a win-win. But as it is Sunday, I am planning to have a very cozy, chilled out, festive, pretty much at home Sunday. I have a couple of jobs to do outside of the house, but for the most part it's going to be a very chilled out day, which I'm very excited about, specifically because my next few days of work are going to be quite busy, so I thought it would be nice to just like enjoy the last day of the weekend. And also I've been looking at my calendar for December and pretty much every single weekend from here until Christmas is going to be jam-packed, so I thought I might as well make the most of like a day with very little plans while I have the chance, because I'm not probably going to have another chance until after Christmas. So there we have it, welcome to the next day of Vlogmas, and without further ado, let's kickstart the day with a cup of tea, because what better way to start any day, let alone a cozy Sunday. So we are now on the 4th, which is here. Okay. As per usual, you get to see it before I do. Oh, Snowball hot cocoa. I remember this one from last year, and it is a coconut and chocolate combination. And honestly, it was so good. I feel like this is testament really to why Bird and Blend is so good, because so far a few of the flavours have been repeats from last year, and yet I haven't been even the tiniest bit disappointed about any of them, because I just remember how good their teas are. And I think, as I mentioned in maybe it was Friday's tea, even though I remembered having drunk and enjoyed that particular flavour last year, I couldn't remember it to the extent that it kind of feels like I'm trying it all over again, only knowing for sure that I'm going to enjoy it. So the combo of ingredients in this one is a Sri Lankan black tea with cocoa shells, cocoa nibs, desiccated coconut and red cornflowers. So without further ado, let's make ourselves a Snowball hot cocoa tea, because that sounds like cozy in a mug. Smells so coconutty, and I know that Bounty is not a chocolate for everyone, and in fact I think it's like criminally underrated and hated in celebrations tins, because for me, right, let's just get into this, I really believe that Twix is the chocolate that should get out of the tin, if anything is going to get out of the tin, because it's not really a chocolate at all, it's a biscuit, so it doesn't belong in the chocolate box, it belongs in a biscuit tin. So that's my hot take. But Bounties, before I was vegan, obviously unfortunately I can't have them anymore, but Bounties were my favourite. It was a toss-up really between Bounty and Milky Way, but the reason I like both of them is because they're like a chocolate coating on the outside with like a really nice texture thing on the inside. I feel like the texture of Milky Way probably wins over Bounty, but the coconut flavour for me is just out of this world. and nothing brings me more devastation, pain, heartache than the fact that there is actually a dark chocolate Bounty, but for some reason it still has milk in it. And I'm like, why would you make a dark chocolate one and not make it vegan? Because it's basically just desiccated coconut oil and sugar in the centre. And I know that dark chocolate can so easily be vegan, so it is honestly the most devastating thing in the world that Bounty is not vegan, because I understand the milk chocolate one, but they have a dark chocolate option right there and it's not for me. So I'm so upset about that. I think Pret sometimes do these like chocolate covered coconut bites that are vegan, and that's basically a Bounty, but it's very hit and miss whether they have them in stock. So I'd love to know in the comments, are you a Bounty lover or a Bounty hater? Because I, for one, am clearly on team Bounty, but this just smells like someone's melted a Bounty and popped it in a cup of tea, because it just has such a lovely chocolate and coconut smell. I want that to build up as much flavour as possible. So while I let that sort of steep, ruminate, what's the word? I think steep is the right word, but I feel like there's another word. Brew. While I let that brew, I wanted to let you know that I am in fact a certified genius. You know that's sound from Euphoria. If you're on TikTok, you'll definitely have heard it, but it's like, hey mom, I'm a genius. And Rue is saying that while she's in a bit of a manic state, but I genuinely am a genius, because obviously, as I mentioned, we have a real Christmas tree, but it is still early in December. Today is obviously the 4th, as we know, because we've just opened day 4 of the advent calendar, and I really do not want this tree to dry out or die before Christmas, because that would be almost as devastating as the Bounty situation. So I've been trying to figure out the best way to water it, because the only jug I have is this one, but it is really large and it's so hard to pour the water in, to the point where it doesn't really seem like I'm getting hardly any water in the base of the tree stand, because it's so tightly packed with the trunk. So I was thinking, what can I do to get some water in there without just ending up getting pretty much all of the water on the floor? And then it came to me in a vision of pure genius, and that was that we had an empty washing up liquid tub, and of course it has like a little squeezy lid, which means that I can fill this up with water and then just lift the tiny little nozzle up and like squeeze it into the base. And I think that's going to be the perfect way to actually get water into the base and know how much I'm putting in without just ending up spilling it all on the floor, which is what's going to happen with all of the like wide-rimmed like cups and glasses that I've got. So if anyone else has a real tree and was struggling to think of a good way to water it without ending up with a pool of water on the floor every time you try, then if you have an empty washing up bottle, then use that, because I feel like this is going to be absolutely game-changing. So there we go, that is my life hack of the day. It just came to me in a vision. So there we go, that is my morning so far. I think it might be about time to try some tea. I could honestly, like, aside from drinking it, I could just quite happily sit here and smell this all day. It's incredible. I'm gonna have a sip now, then I'm gonna stir a spoonful of sugar in and see what that does to it. So let's have a sip just as it is, as it comes from the tub. Have another one because it's so nice. It just has like this incredible burst of like chocolate coconut as soon as you like let the flavour sit on your tongue. It is just incredible. I really feel like chocolate and coconut are a match made in heaven, but specifically it's so impressive that the chocolate manages to be so strong in this tea, and I think that's because the chocolate and coconut complement each other so well that you notice the flavours more. Because I think I mentioned in Friday when I was having the chocolate digestive tea, the smell of chocolate was strong but the flavour was a little bit weaker than I'd expected, but this, honestly, exceptional. So I'm now going to grab some sugar. I don't have sugar in my tea very often. I used to have it always, and then I cut it out from like hot drinks cold turkey. So now the only time I really will have a sugary drink is if I'm having like hot chocolate, or if I'm like out at a cafe and I get syrup in a coffee. I don't really ever have it at home, but on this very special festive occasion, I'm just going to sprinkle in maybe like half a spoonful of sugar and just see what that does to the situation. The good thing I think about not having sugar in your tea regularly is that when you do have a sweet drink, you really notice it, whereas before I could have like 2 sugars in every cup of tea, and I started to think about how quickly that was adding up given how many cups of tea I have in a day, and it really dawned on me that I was like having way too much sugar. But now you notice just even a tiny amount, so cheers to that. Oh yeah, that is good, that is really good. I feel like because it's obviously coconut and chocolate on their own and not particularly sweet flavours, they are like bitter-ish. Well, coconut's not really bitter, it's more creamy, and the chocolate is a little bit bitter, and I feel like the sweetness there just elevates it. Wow, would recommend. I mean, that tea is delicious on its own anyway, but I do feel like the sugar in this one works, so absolutely lovely. Now, as I've said, I'm planning to have a very cosy, chilled out, festive day at home. Jay is currently at the gym, so what I'm going to do is enjoy this absolutely exceptional cup of tea, and I'm going to watch Zoella's Vlogmas episode 1. It came out on, I think, Friday evening, and I haven't had a chance to sit down and watch it yet because we ended up being so busy on Saturday, and I was out on Friday evening for my grandma's birthday meal, so I haven't been able to watch it yet, and there are now 2 episodes out, and I honestly cannot tell you how much I love Zoe's Vlogmas videos. I have since 2013 when I think she started them. I just think that they really symbolise Christmas to me. They just feel so lovely and so festive. And they just make me so happy. And last year she had only very recently had her baby, so she didn't really do an official Vlogmas because she was obviously taking care of an actual human child and was like otherwise occupied, which was absolutely fine. But I think it's so fun now that she is like doing her first like official Vlogmas as a mum, and it's so nice to like see all of the traditions that she's going to be making for Ottilie, and I just think it's so nice that her Vlogmases are back. So very grateful that her Vlogmas is on this year because I look forward to it so much. So I feel like this morning is the perfect time to settle down with a cup of tea and watch some Zoella because it does not get better than that. This afternoon I was planning to make my own Christmas decorations, you know, like those dried orange type ones, because our Christmas tree, I love it, however I do feel like it's a little bit sparse in terms of how many decorations we've got because Christmas decorations are expensive, and our tree this year is bigger than our tree last year, so it looks a little bit more empty, and I thought it might be nice to try and make some of my own decorations. However, apparently to make those dried orange things you have to leave your oven on and have them in the oven for like 5 to 6 hours, and that would mean that we couldn't leave the house for that duration, like we couldn't go for a walk or anything, and also I think by the time I got around to actually getting them out of the oven it would be quite dark, and I don't really want to do it in the dark. I want to be able to see it in full light when I put the decorations up, so I'm going to be doing that probably later in the week because I think it's something I can easily do on a work day because I can put them in the oven before I start work, and then obviously because I work from home it's not like it's going to impede my day having to stay in while they're in the oven for 6 hours because I would be at home upstairs in the office anyway, so that is still going to be happening, but not today. However, I then had a bit of a void in my day because I wanted to do something with myself and like make something practical, so I decided to do some baking instead. And what I've ended up settling on is I'm making cinnamon rolls, but instead of being just cinnamon rolls, they're kind of like gingerbread rolls. So the dough that I've made, which is currently sitting right here and is rising right now, is like flour, a little bit of sugar, vegan butter and some oat milk, which is how I would usually make an enriched dough for something like cinnamon rolls, but then I've added in cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, golden syrup and dark treacle into the dough, so it should be quite like a rich and I guess like more flavourful dough than I would normally have for cinnamon rolls. And then the like buttery spread that goes in the middle is also going to have cinnamon, ginger and golden syrup in. So I'm quite excited about them because I feel like it's a fun festive take on what is, I would say, like usually quite an autumnal treat, and I feel like this is a way to make cinnamon rolls a little bit more Christmassy. So I'm currently waiting for the dough to rise. It's been rising for about an hour and I probably will give it 2, so that will take me up to about 2:30 in the afternoon. So while I wait for that to happen, I'm going to do some more reading of Me Before You because I am on page 325. The book has 475, so I've got like 150 pages left to go, and I would really like to finish this book today. So now seems like the perfect time, since I'm just waiting for the dough to rise, to get on with a little bit more reading. Well, I have to say I was a little bit apprehensive about these little gingerbread cinnamon bun things, but I'm very pleased with how they turned out. I think I probably left them in for maybe like 3 minutes too long, which is always annoying when you just know that they've caught just a tiny little bit extra on top. But actually once the icing has got on and like the glaze and everything, it doesn't actually look too bad. So I think I probably pulled them out just in time before it was too late to turn back. But very, very pleased with them. They were, as you probably could tell from the assembly part of this video, quite messy to make. So instead of making like cinnamon rolls, I decided to do them as like little cinnamon gingerbread knot type things. So instead of rolling up in just like a pinwheel shape, I kind of like rolled them over into like an envelope kind of shape and then cut them into strips, twisted them up and made little bun shapes. And I'm always so nervous putting things like this in the oven because they never look big enough when you put them in, and I'm always so apprehensive. And then when you pull them out, they've always puffed up and they look really, really good. And these smell just like gingerbread, which is obviously what I was going for. So I'm very, very happy, but obviously the proof is in the pudding, so I do need to test them in order to give you a full review. But on the whole, very, very pleased with how these turned out. And I feel like now, not only have we got the tree up, but now that I've done some festive baking, it feels like Christmas is officially on the way, because I just love nothing more than a little bit of festive baking. And I feel like I do tend to stick to like the same, you know, rough few recipes all the time, because if you've got something that you know works and that you enjoy, then why not just make that all the time? But I do quite enjoy taking those like base recipes like cookies, like cinnamon rolls and brownies and things like that, and then just making them with a slight festive twist to suit the season. So very pleased with how they turned out, and they were definitely a good way to spend my afternoon. Not least because they gave me the perfect amount of time to just sit and finish off reading Me Before You, which I will admit, despite having a pretty clear idea by about halfway into the book of where it was going to go and how it was going to end, still managed to pull a tear from my eye, because it was just a really, like, I think, well written and emotional book, where it was like you knew what was going to happen and yet you still felt all of the emotions that you imagine the characters were feeling about this particular event. And I feel like it was very, very, very good. I personally really enjoyed it. I feel like I've seen maybe mixed reviews on this book in general, but I feel like for me at least it was well written, engaging. I liked all of the characters, and obviously having gone into it expecting to cry, I did. Therefore it was a successful read in every aspect. So yeah, definitely enjoyed this one, although it's been out for so long. I'm sure most people have already read it. I hadn't, so I'm glad that I finally ticked it off. Someone mentioned in the comments of yesterday's video there are sequels, but I don't necessarily think I'm interested in reading the sequels as such. I feel like I enjoyed this particular story, but I don't necessarily feel drawn to the idea of like following along with Louisa. In the future, maybe I will at some point, but I'm not like rushing out to get the sequels. But I am very glad that I read this one, and just like the first book that I read in December, which was The Christmas Wish, I've given this one 5 stars as well, because it's Christmas, why not give out 5 stars like they're going out of fashion? So of course, now that I've finished that book, it is once again time to spin the spinning wheel of books. So without further ado, I'm going to head to my handy dandy book wheel, and we are going to find out what book I'm going to be reading next. So without further ado, it's spinning. Okay, so I decided, as I mentioned, to put a few rereads on this list, and I put all 3 of Sally Rooney's books on this list. Conversations with Friends, her first novel, is my favourite book probably ever, and Normal People is also a favourite of mine. I really, really love it. But her more recent novel, which came out last year, I believe, or was it this year? No, it must have been last year. Came out last year, and I didn't love it, which was a real shock to me at the time, because I was expecting to go into the book feeling all of the love that I had felt for her previous 2 novels. But I now feel like potentially maybe I judged it prematurely, didn't give it enough of a chance, and because it felt different to her other books, I just kind of dismissed it. So I decided to add that book onto this list as well, give it another chance and see how I feel about Beautiful World, Where Are You for a second time. So with that said, I might go grab that off the shelves, make myself a cup of tea, have one of my gingerbread cinnamon roll not bun situations, and get started on a little bit more reading, because it's not quite dinner time yet, and I feel like now would be the perfect time to do some more reading. So without further ado, gonna get that one off my shelf and see how I feel about it, because yeah, I don't know, I'm hopeful that I love it more the second time around. So yeah, let's give it a try. Just like to say that those cinnamon gingerbread knots are incredible. I can't really decide what I want to call them. Are they gingerbread swirls? Are they gingerbread buns? Are they cinnamon gingerbread buns? Are they buns? Are they knots? Are they twists? I don't really know, but what I do know is they were delicious. I do think things like that taste even more delicious straight out of the oven or slightly warmed up and they were still like warm and gooey. But I think sometimes when I've made cinnamon rolls, they can like, I don't know, the distribution of moisture can be like a little bit off, like where the bottom feels a bit soggier and the top is really crispy. But I think because of the way that the buttery filling is kind of like interwoven in a knot sort of bun like I've done rather than a swirl, it really was like just perfect amount of like soft cinnamony goodness all the way through, and I loved it. So that was exceptional. I also made a start on my reread of Beautiful World, Where Are You? Only like 30 pages in, but I'm not minding it so far. But I feel like because of how I know that I felt about this book the first time around, I'm kind of like approaching it trying to see like what potentially I didn't like the first time around, because so far it hasn't offended me in the slightest. I do think from the very small amount of the book that I've read, paired with my remembrance of the first time I read it, it does feel almost like a combination of Sally Rooney's two other books, because we have this group of 4 people who kind of intertwine with each other but also have their very own like separate storylines going on, and that feels very similar to Conversations with Friends in the way that that is all about how different people interact with each other and how relationships don't necessarily need to exist in such a sort of normative box, and how different relationships all influence one another and equally can have such levels of importance despite the labels that you might put on them. So I feel like that element of the book is kind of in existence because of the way that it is focused on 4 different characters and their interactions with each other, but then it also focuses on 2 specific relationships within those 4 characters, and I feel like that feels very similar to Normal People, and specifically there is 2 characters, Alice and Felix, and their inability to like communicate with each other is the best word to describe it, is terrible, like truly terrible. And I feel like that is very similar to Marianne and Connell in Normal People. So I feel like there are elements of both of her previous novels that have influenced the way that this book is written and the dynamics that we see sort of like taking place within this novel. And another thing that I think is interesting about this book, but maybe makes it stand out slightly from her other 2, is the way that it is written with quite a few different styles of prose. So we have a more detached kind of descriptive prose talking about the characters from like an outside point of view and telling you like what's going on and who they are and what's happening in their lives from a very much like narrator point of view. But then there are also interactions between Alice and Eileen through letter, email, text and all that kind of stuff, where they then write from their very own perspective, and so you have this like balance between seeing things from the external viewpoint and then seeing how the characters perceive things themselves, which I think is interesting but maybe a little bit jarring at sometimes, because you feel like you're moving between 2 very opposing styles of text, but then equally it does give you, I guess, a more rounded view of the characters in the end. So there we have it. I'm not making any major judgments right now, but I'm hoping to enjoy it more this time around, so I'm trying to look for the things that I'm enjoying rather than the things that I'm not. So there we go. I'm currently making some pasta for dinner, and I think we're going to watch a Christmas film tonight, and by I think we are, I mean I'm going to make Jay watch a Christmas film tonight. Specifically, I saw on Amazon Prime there is a brand new Christmas film called Your Christmas or Mine, and it has, I think is the actor's name, Asa Butterfield. He's the guy from Sex Education, and he plays one of the main characters, and it's basically him and his new girlfriend are saying goodbye to each other before Christmas at a train station, and then at the last minute they decide that they can't bear to spend time apart from each other over Christmas, and so they decide to swap trains. Like the other one, basically they both think that they're going to join the other one on the train, but they've both simultaneously made the same decision, and so like inadvertently they end up on the opposite train to each other still, but instead of going to their own family homes they end up with no choice but to go and spend Christmas with their partner's family but on their own. And it's kind of like whether the relationship will last that test of spending time with your significant other's family on your own without them to kind of like be your buffer. So I for one think that sounds like it'll be quite a fun film, and I do think it's nice to have different Christmas films to watch every year rather than just having to recycle the same old favourites. Although I do like them, I think it's important to like throw new ones in as well so that you don't get bored of the old ones. So, gonna make some pasta, gonna make some garlic bread, and then watch a Christmas film. you know what, I actually really enjoyed that film. I feel like it was, first of all, a very unique Christmas film concept. It had like the, I guess, like aura of comfortable predictability that I think all festive rom-coms have, where you kind of know that you're going to get a happy ending, but it felt like it took so many different twists and turns to get there, and it really kept you on your toes. So whereas like Hallmark films, for example, are so predictable, you can almost like close your eyes, cover your ears, and you still know what's going on. This one, like, you had to pay a little bit more attention, but it was still like very chilled out, but just like a very fun and I guess a slightly more unique way to approach a Christmas film. I also thought just the general like plot point of this almost like Parent Trap meets Christmas movie meets Meet the Parents kind of combo that we had going on was so much fun, because we obviously had this kind of, I don't want to say tired concept, but meet the family, meet the parents is like a concept that comes up in films like all the time, and I feel like especially in like festive settings, so that's something that's very familiar. But in this one it felt like Parent Trap had kind of collided with that world, because instead of like just meeting the parents in a traditional way, we had this like crossing over of lives and not necessarily like taking on the other one's role, but having to experience Christmas in another family is quite a unique concept, especially when you're like on your own and trying to navigate like the family dynamics without your partner there to guide you through it. So I thought it was a really fun way to approach that like festive family meeting situation, and I really liked it. And I also think the age of the characters sort of at university but still living at home kind of like added to that, because it just made it so interesting to see that they had like completely separate home and university lives, and I just thought it was a really fun film, and I loved how it played out. It was a perfect like chilled out, very entertaining Sunday evening watch, and if you are looking for a like new Christmas film to watch this year, I would definitely recommend adding that one to your list, because I really did like it. It definitely did not disappoint. And that has very nicely brought me right up to Sunday bedtime. I'm gonna get an early night tonight because, as I've mentioned, I think I have a busy couple of days coming up with work, so I want to get a nice good restful night's sleep before starting the work week. But before I go to bed, I wanted to hit you up with my tea inspired book recommendation for this week's vlog. And I keep saying this week's vlog even though it's only a single day, but I wanted to let you know my tea recommendation / book recommendation for today's Vlogmas video. So without further ado, if we cast our minds back to this morning's tea, it was a chocolate coconut snowball combination, which 100% reminded me of Bounty. And so with that said, Bounty, as I mentioned, was one of my favourite, if not my favourite, like chocolate from the Celebrations tin, despite being one that doesn't necessarily get as much hype as it should, but the people that hype it up with so much passion. And so with that said, I've gone for an author who has quite a selection of books, and I think people have very specific opinions on which one of this author's books are their favourite, and they will fight tooth and nail for their specific book, but then feel very dispassionately about some of the other ones. And so for me personally, the book that I've gone for is Emma by Jane Austen, which is my personal favourite Austen book. But I think Emma Woodhouse as a protagonist, and by extension her book in general, gets a lot of hate, and I think it's undue hate, because I think she is an incredible character and one who we see so much growth in throughout her novel, which I just think is so satisfying to see. And not to say that we don't see growth in other Austen characters, but I don't think that they're necessarily as trackable, because I think some of her other characters start off so like moral and pious and good, that you don't get to see such like impressive growth in the character, whereas I think in Emma we see her like really develop from basically like a selfish and very self-absorbed young lady into someone who has so much more self-awareness and so much more empathy for other characters. And I think we just see such a really incredible amount of growth in her as a character. So I personally think that she is a character worth reading about and worth like sort of rooting for, but other people don't necessarily share that opinion unless they do, and then they really do. And that is why I've given this book the Bounty / chocolate coconut snowball tea seal of approval, because I feel like when you give bounties a try and if you like them, then you will fight for them whenever someone sort of insults them when you're talking about Christmas chocolates. But if you don't like them, that's it, you push them to the side and you don't give them another chance. And that is my opinion on how I've seen people act towards Emma as a book and as a character. So there we go. Bounty Snowball Coconut Tea equals Emma by Jane Austen. I'm having so much fun because I feel like I'm reaching for like the most specific things that make me think of a book, and I think that's a really fun way to do book recommendations. So that will very nicely not only bring me up to bedtime but also bring us to the end of this vlog. I know that Vlogmas videos are usually 2 days put together, but today for Sunday special I decided to make this one a 1 day only Vlogmas, and that is just because of the busy work schedule that I have coming up at the beginning of next week. I want to make sure that I can edit this vlog tomorrow morning before starting work so that it actually goes up on time on Monday evening. So with that said, I'm going to head to bed. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a wonderful Sunday, whatever you did with it, and I will see you in a couple of days for the next Vlogmas video.